Hi, everybody. Welcome to the PC Perspective Podcast. This is episode number, let me double check, 163 for July 21st, 2011. I'm Ryan Schraub.
I'm Jeremy Hellstrom.
And I'm Al Malventano without Josh in the middle.
We are Joshless this afternoon. He had some personal issues to take care of, and he will be back next week, all things being the same. I guess we need to kind of commemorate, this may be our last episode of the PC Perspective Podcast recorded at the Twitch, or the Twit Cottage, rather. So, a little bow, a little nod of approval. Thank you to everybody there. We plan on, unless they're going to drop us, like just throw us off at the curb, being recorded at the new studio, which will be opening up on Sunday, I believe, based on what the current working schedule is. So we'll have a new kind of operating procedure and all. This is definitely a review you want to check out. I spent some time with the BlackBerry Playbook as well, and though very impressed with the fit and finish of the hardware and many aspects of the software, I think there are still a lot of aspects of the software that fall behind, obviously the iPad, and still in many cases the Android-based tablets as well. So if you're curious about that, if you're kind of like hard set on the BlackBerry network of devices or the BlackBerry kind of ecosystem, you definitely want to check out this article because it may not match up with what you expected in terms of hardware, software, that types of thing. But it does come with a racing game in it and a free sleeve, protective sleeve. So you got that going for you.
Looks more like a Lenovo than a RIM to me, especially the back of it.
Yeah, you know what? It's very square. It has a very I like the finish on it. It's not a hard shiny plastic. It's kind of a softer rubberized type finish to it. A little bit easier to hold. Ins and outs of setting up an iFinity system for the first time, running through the hardware configuration, the software configuration, what the gaming experience is like, and also if you check out the comments section, a whole lot of really good discussion was going on where people are asking mostly intelligent questions of Josh about what he used, what different configuration options he tried or maybe didn't try. The communication going on in the comments section is actually very, very good. So I would highly check that out. Even if you read the review, maybe say last Thursday or Friday when it went up, go back and check out the comments. There's a lot of new information in there as well. So that is also on the site. And the final bit, this is also kind of looking at the mobile market, actually scaling measurements, text scaling measurements, and how smooth the operation is in all of these types of things. So we went through and kind of played with all the individual tests and then ran through the benchmark suite on, I think about 10 devices, actually, that we happen to have on hand here at the office, ranging from the ePad Transformer down to the original Droid X. And what's nice about this benchmark, with a lot of 3D Mark 11, 3D Mark Vantage, PC Marks, is it does give you kind of a single score at the end that you can use to compare to different systems. Now, you can still break that down into various categories and look at all those details, which we are definitely looking at doing in future articles when we start to look at more and more phones. But you can see anything like the ePad Transformer, the Motorola Zoom, MyTouch 4G Slide, Evo 4G, Thunderbolt, Nexus S 4G, a lot of other of those types of devices if you're interested in where...
Right. Yeah, once I saw, back then the GUI was horrible for that stuff and trying to use a stylus on a screen and all that was just crap. So that's why I ended up jumping ship to the iPhone. Yeah.
So one of the things that's interesting, and this came up at Computex, it's come up for really since smartphones have taken over, is how do you measure performance on this? There's a lot of kind of weird one-time use benchmarks that a lot of websites, including us, use to try to compare performance from phone to phone. Even when they're using the same operating system and the same chip, there are differences in terms of what the user interface enhancements that a company like Motorola or Samsung might have added to the phone, how they affect overall performance. But really what it comes down to is user experience, and that's something that obviously Apple has mastered, and that we are hoping as these Android phones continue to develop, as they continue to get better and improve in all these ways, that we will see those types of results improve. And so this benchmark, the Volamo benchmark, actually does some of the analytics. It does CPU and GPU type performance, but it also does some things like the scrolling performance, the image resizing, and the text.
It's bad press about that sort of thing lately, where you have a certain benchmark that's endorsed or something by somebody, and then as soon as someone figures out that, right. The results are a little swayed or bottom, so I doubt they would have chosen to do something like that. At least not intentionally, right?
Right. Fair enough. Let's see, Jeremy, you posted something about a pretty interesting new motherboard from ZOTAC that I think a lot of our listeners and viewers are going to be interested in if you're looking at home theater PC or just in general small form factor systems.
Or, frankly, a LAN box. Because this thing is little micro ATX Z68 board with a really funky dual antenna Wi-Fi add-on, which, in a way, the Rudolph nose is sticking off the end there.
Right, yeah.
It's an odd look, but they're covering the antenna so you can stick whatever you want in the way of antennas.
I think it comes with the actual external antenna.
It does, and extra USB ports and locking SATA cables, and are actually a really sweet package, but it sort of looks like it's designed for something that's going into a case that's moving and that doesn't want to have to deal with a lot of wires.
Sure.
They did trim off quite a bit because, we're talking about a micro ITX board, which is really tiny.
Yeah.
So you've got one PCI Express 16, which does a full 16X. So you can, if you can find a case that's actually going to fit a dual slot cooler or a GPU in the bottom of the case, or if you scrounge around, if you figure out some better cooling, you might be able to find a single slot solution that will fit in. But you will be able to run it full, and that kind of really helps in a way.
Is that Bi16 2.0?
This is what it says.
Yeah.
So essentially, they went for a high-end Z68 board, and then they just hacked everything that they could off of it.
How did they even fit it together like that? That's amazing.
It's impressive. It's incredibly impressive. And, there are some other different problems that you get. It's got about 4 SATA ports on it, where, we're used to one controller has 4 and the other has even more. On the other hand, you put in the add-on card, and it's got 8 USB slots, which is going to really help you out, again, if you're playing around, trying to deal with all the peripherals you need for a LAN setup. From what the review said, they don't exactly have the most brilliant overclocking capability going. So if you're sort of hoping for a little tiny, absolutely silent, water-cooled, high-end system, you may not quite get it out of it. But if you're looking for something that's small and really quick, this thing was really keeping up with a lot of the competition. And one of the things was that, for as far as power goes, it sat sort of in the middle of the row for power consumption at idle. As soon as you looked at power consumption at full, this thing does not eat power at all. They've done more than just trim it off. They've got different pathways going on the motherboard. It's actually a really, really impressive piece of engineering. So, if you're looking at a small form factor system, if you're looking at something that you want to put it in a LAN box and be able to cart around,
right,
definitely something worth looking into.
Yeah, I like the idea of being able to get a full-size processor, a full capability processor. You only get one expansion slot, so you have to be sure that this is what you want, right, up front. It's got, integrated audio, Wi-Fi, pretty much anything you're going to need. Pinning, I just came from PDX Land last weekend up in Portland. We're going to be in QuakeCon in not too long, just a couple of weeks. This would be the perfect type of machine for me to bring to that LAN party because you can make it light and you don't have to worry about carrying a giant tower like I imagine the one that Alan uses on a daily basis. So very cool. Check out that review. I think Tech Power Up posted that, and you can see the link to it from our show notes. Real quick, before we get into the rest of the show, we've got a lot more news to get to, also including 1 billion work units being hit by our very own DC teams. 1 billion?
Yeah. American billion, but still.
American billion, right, exactly. First, we'll take a quick break here. Thank today's podcast sponsor. All right, thank you, MSI, for that. So now let's talk to Jeremy about the 1 billion with a B.
You could fit 30 of those ZOTACs in there, baby.
Oh, good Lord.
See, that's what I mean.
Turn it on
that's
its side.
exactly
It's a 3U rack.
With the water cooling. And
now,
the
how many
Jello
hard drives
pudding.
are inside the case?
Oh, yes.
No, there's a question. How many hard drives are inside the case?
Oh, how many?
Yeah.
4 SSDs and 8 2-terabyte hard drives.
Not enough.
That's
Not
all?
enough. That's it.
Need a
No,
few more.
not enough. Jeremy, tell us about 1 billion work units and what the wonderful team from PC Perspective has been doing with all this.
Well, we're specifically talking about the PC Perspective Killer Frogs, our BOINC team, the Berkeley Open Infrastructure for Network Computing, as opposed to the Folding Frogs, who are also wonderful people, and Folding does tend to get a little bit more press than BOINC does. For, understandable reasons. Most of us have been affected by cancer in our lives. This may or may not help do a lot of research, and probably a lot more than a lot of the donations that go out, because you're not paying PR company.
This is kind of like last week when we talked about Bitcoin mining. You choose to do what you want with your extra computing power. There are lots of options out there.
And I am a major contributor to the PC Perspective Killer Frogs. But as far as combined BOINC projects, and there are a significant amount of different BOINC projects out there, from what essentially started it all, which was SETI at home.
Right.
Looking for a ride off the planet, trying to see if there's anything else out there in the universe, through climate prediction, Einstein at home looking for unified theory, CPU grid just to play with, Milky Way at home to try and just map the Milky Way, the Large Hadron Collider dumps their data here for double checking. All combined, we are now in 59th position in the world with 1,323,566,819 work units completed. And God knows how many flops thrown at it. But it's... Bitcoin, hey, it's a gamble. You might pay off, you might not. This, you're tossing in your spare CPU cycles towards science. And frankly, if you've got spare CPU cycles, just donate them. Use them. If you're not going to, turn the bloody thing off. It's that simple.
Where would somebody go if they wanted to join the PC Perspective Folding team, BioInc team, BOINC team, as you call them?
Well, it's a very, very unknown fact that PC Perspective has an entire forum attached to it.
You do?
In which you can indeed get the links to not just SETI at home, but every single project that we do at forums.pcper.com, and you're looking for the distributed computing, and then you can make your choice as to whether you're going to BOINC or whether you're going to Folding at home, or if you're just going to donate cycles to each. Although, don't try and run the GPU client of the Folding at home with the CPU of the BOINC, because it doesn't work well.
You've tried that before, it sounds like.
Yeah, it really did well.
Not
But
good.
there's a great group of people. Drop by. I mean, I've been there since the days of Dave the Dictator Pender, who's long gone. But hey, one of the founding fathers of was he there for K7M?
Probably.
He start for AMD MB.
Yeah,
But,
he might have been one of the originals. You can also check in the show notes for this podcast. We'll have a link to this post where we talk about the 1 billion work units. And Jeremy has provided quite a few links into the forum and different places for the Killer Frogs, BOINC, Killer Folding Frogs, all those type of things as well. We would highly
Every
welcome
Friday
you
so that you can have something to read with your beer.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Alan is going to talk to us a little bit about some new Intel Sandy Bridge E-processors that have been rumored, and now they're rumored to be coming out just in time for Christmas. Is this something that enthusiasts should be getting excited about? Server users should be getting excited about? What exactly is this?
Okay, well, people that would have been getting excited about this might be a little less excited, actually.
Okay.
The way that it's looking like it's coming out. So processors and a chipset that was supposed to come out later or early, was it early next year initially?
Right.
And now it's going to be earlier, so that's going to be like Q4 around Christmas time, that time frame. And again, this is rumor, so subject to slide to the left or the right, obviously. But so earlier, yes. However, features also less. As far as PCI Express 3 is not going to make it, at least not yet. And serial ATA 6 gigabit will be there, but it's going to be the same way it is right now in the form of there's only 2 ports. In other words, not all 6 channels will be serial ATA 3 or 6 gigabit. So, yeah, that's sort of, I mean, chipset-wise, that's sort of looks like what we have right now as far as those features go. Because you're dropping it back down to PCI Express 2, right? And only 2 of those ports being 6 gigabit. So I don't know. I mean, I didn't research this really in depth, but what does that leave for improvements? Just out of curiosity.
Yeah, the X79 chipset doesn't look. I mean, if this is what it turns out to be, no PCI 3.0 support, the same combination of SATA 3.0 and 2.0 running in there. You know, you still get the advantages of the processor itself, of the Sandy Bridge E processor, which is it was supposed to, like you were saying, it was originally going to be due in January, but now moved up a little bit. Apparently, what they're saying is that Intel's had trouble testing the engineering silicon with PCI 3.0 cards, and so they're actually stepping back in the feature set. Now, they had never really kind of publicly announced the feature set of the X79 chipset in this platform, but obviously what internally has happened is that they said they might have told partners here's what we're going to have, and now they've pulled back on what that performance is going to be. What's kind of interesting about this is it doesn't mean motherboard manufacturers aren't going to be able to ship boards with PCIe 3.0 on them anyway. Case in point, MSI has on its way to me a motherboard that will support PCI 3.0 speeds via an overclocked PCI Express 2.0 interface on their motherboard. So that's, you know, they'll have the capability to do this, but it's not going to be official PCIe 3.0 support. The whole SATA thing obviously is going to go the other way. If you don't have SATA 6 gigabit per second ports, you're not going to magically create more SATA 6.0 gigabit per second ports. So that is a little bit of a letdown there, especially considering AMD continues to offer full SATA 6G across all of their 990FX motherboards, and I believe on all of their Llano-based motherboards as well. So their Southbridge and their chipset controller technology seems to be a little bit more advanced than Intel is, at least a little bit more accepting of it, or a little bit more prepared for this coming change. So we'll keep an eye on that as well, and also keep an eye out for our testing of PCI 3.0 speeds. And as Alan and I kind of went back and forth a couple of weeks ago, maybe it's longer than that, back at Computex timeframe when I first saw this motherboard, it's really only going to be useful for PCI Express-based solid-state drives. So, you know, we're going to do some testing with one of those motherboards and that SSD, and test it on the 2.0 board and 3.0 board, and see if we see any differences worth paying extra money for, right? Because that's what it really all comes down to. There aren't any PCI Express 3.0 graphics cards, and when there are, they won't require PCI Express 3.0 bandwidth to really function. You know, we're not using the full bandwidth of a PCI Express 2.0 by 16 graphics slot today if we really get down to the nitty-gritty of it. So,
which is why you shouldn't complain when your PCI Express cards are dropped down to 8X.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
really,
for SLI and Crossfire systems that do that today, it's really not making hardly any difference. If any difference at all, it's negligible write-off. Another thing we saw this week is Steam is readying an update to its download system just in time. Well, that doesn't really say just in time for what here in this post. This looks like it's more of...
No, there was a what?
What's that?
There was a just in time for what thing?
Oh, it was for the summer sale.
No,
they missed the summer sale completely.
No, right. The summer sale actually is what overloaded the crap out of them, like last week or somewhere around there. Yeah, and it's DOTA 2 is supposed to be pushed out on the new. It's like the last paragraph in our news post, actually.
Okay. Okay.
That's they sort of said that, but yeah. What's funny about that is there's this huge list called Valve Time, which is. I don't know if any of you have seen that. It's like what they said and then what actually happened, and so it's like sort of a translator for that. Right. So I'm sure that this will probably turn into an entry on the Valve Time chart, you know, where next week equates to 1 week and 3 days, and any minute now equates to 5 days later.
Right. So that's
like
on
Blizzard, but not quite as Glacier ish.
The funny part
Yeah.
is that website is actually, that listing is actually on the valvesoftware.com wiki page.
Yes.
So it says today means tonight at 11:49 p.m. Pacific time. Q1 actually translates into the third week of Q2.
Yes.
Shortly translates into in 6 months. Things like that. At least they have a sense of humor about it. They're leaving.
And
that
they
page
have
up
they
there
even
on
have references, like it's linked. Like,
Oh, yeah.
There's so many
this
links
is their,
on that.
Yeah,
That's
this is
great.
their release that says this, and then this is when it actually came out. It's actually linked
any
off.
minute
and-
now means 5 days later. I
Work
find
with
it hilarious.
developers. 8 years, 6 months, 25 days.
It's freaking awesome. Yeah, but anyhow, so they're revamping their system. Hopefully, maybe that'll be the entry. It'll say "quote unquote" hopefully. Hopefully soon, that'll come out along with DOTA 2.
So what's the benefit in this? Is it switching
supposed
to
to
standard
be-
HTTP?
Actually, I'm not sure what the.
It says the hypertext
Well-
transport protocol is more readily permitted than other ports. Second benefit is that data protocol is potentially cached. Thus,
okay.
Another use to share some stretch of internet between you and Valve is possible. You will not need to fetch the data all the way from Valve. Those types of things.
Right. So so just from generic networking knowledge, if you're piggybacking on HTTP, yes, it's more likely to get through a lot of things, especially if they're using the default port, port 80
Right.
for HTTP. Because there's plenty of systems or networks, although usually that's like business kind of networks that block that stuff.
That means you can finally play your Steam games at work, Alan.
Yeah, no, not at my work.
Well, you don't have the internet speed for that, so.
But I want to see it
Yeah.
on that big screen.
I'm not even at the big screen anymore. I'm at a different place now.
Oh,
Yeah,
true.
No more 27-foot diameter screen in front of me. Darn.
Oh, sad Alan. It does also say that the new system will be able to perform differential synchronization. So if a 2 gigabyte file is edited by 4 kilobytes, you will soon only need to receive the 4 kilobyte difference, which I find that very hard to believe that wasn't the case before. But
So
I guess
this would basically make it, for those that know, it would make it like downloading a torrent if you had most of the file already.
I
That
see.
kind of thing. And it would do
Okay.
some kind of a hash based on what the difference is within the file. But that all depends on how they push out their updates, right? Because they would have to have that in mind. Like if they update the game and
Right.
and it's like a packed, compressed file that's getting updated, unless they only change that part of the packed, compressed file, if they recompress it from scratch, it's going to change the whole file, and you just downloaded 2 gig again. So I imagine they're going to wise up to that. Maybe not immediately, but they would probably, in the future, substream or make their changes a little bit better from front to back, not just the distribution system.
Okay. As I mentioned earlier in the show, I was in Portland, Oregon last weekend, actually attending my very first PDX LAN, which PDX is, if you don't know, is the airport code for Portland. And the show, at least in this instance, takes place near the airport at Portland. Apparently, this is the 18th iteration of PDX Land, but my first one. They have multiple a year, so it hasn't been going on for 18 years. So this is a collection of like any kind of LAN party. This is a 500-seat LAN event. 500 gamers, PC gamers sitting around playing PC games, showing off their systems. There are sponsors there. NVIDIA was there. MSI, ZOTAC, Gigabyte, Sapphire was there. There were others as well. And it's a big community event. It's hosted basically in the convention center of the Holiday Inn there. So, nothing super fancy, nothing super ritzy, but, it was a lot of fun. They had cookouts. They had games. NVIDIA was sponsoring prizes. Lots of other companies were sponsoring prizes. Thermaltake was there as well. I forgot to mention them. And I went there mostly just to kind of hang out, see the event. Hadn't been there ever before. Wanted to see what kind of experience it was. And so they had some pretty cool, as you would expect, case mods there. Apparently one of the more popular trends in LAN parties that maybe I just was way out of the loop on is these LAN stands that they have where the monitor sits below the system. You have this kind of four-legged table that basically sits on the desk, putting the system above you, and then you have your mod and everything above you. Creates more space in the LAN, and obviously moves heat higher up above you as well. Some pretty cool case mods. My favorite one is from a guy named Nightmare, Nitemayr, and he had a case that was, I'm trying to remember what the base of it was. I think it was an Antec P180 or something like that, but it's all Lego based. And so if you look at the inside, you'll see
That's
that
awesome.
There are Legos kind of like holding up certain pieces. Much of it is decorative, as you might expect, but there's a lot of functionality in there as well. The crane to the left
isn't that water cooled with like huge, like enormous water cooling tubes?
Yeah, it's water cooled. You'll see like little Lego guys inside that look like they're working on things. The crane on the outside is fully functional, and you can control it through software on the computer. On the very, very front of it, which I don't know if we'll be able to get a good picture of it in the video, there's right above the blue case, you'll see like a little blue guy, right? And although it's in a picture format, not in video format, so it's not as effective. But the coolest part I thought about that is that this Lego man, is a welder, and he's welding. And they made the hard drive LED the light inside his little welding gun. So the hard drive activity looks like welding light. It's very bright white LED. It's very cool when you see it in motion. But yeah, that was one of the cooler things I saw. And then a little bit further down, Gigabyte had one that was using like I think that's actually, I don't know, it looks like the Skull bottle from whatever that brand of vodka is, or something that came out in the last couple of years.
Oh, you mean Dan Aykroyd's?
Yeah. I'm not sure this is the same one, but it looks very similar to that.
Oh, that could be my pick of the week. I still got some of that in the fridge. A friend of mine bought it for a birthday present. It's amusing.
There was a lot of cool stuff there. Not as big of an area if you've been to QuakeCon before or something like that. It's not an event near to that type of size. There's not that much sponsor stuff going on. They did have like a knock area, and they had some screens, and NVIDIA did a show there and that kind of stuff. But it's not where you're going to have these huge game announcements and hardware announcements and stuff like that you might see at PAX or QuakeCon or other such shows. But if you live in that area, there was actually somebody who won a graphics card for traveling the furthest to come to the event, and he came from New Zealand. So I'm not sure if I would have come from New Zealand for that event. It was a lot of fun, but that's a long way to go. So we'll talk more about LAN events and QuakeCon a little bit later in the show, actually, because we're going to try to get all of you guys to come on out to the PC Perspective Hardware Workshop and get some free stuff. But if you live in Portland or in the area, look it up, pdxland.net, I believe. Just look it up, all one word, PDX Land. It was a really fun event, and I thank everybody there for welcoming me, setting me up a spot to play some StarCraft 2, and by playing StarCraft 2, I mean getting my ass handed to me in StarCraft 2. It was a lot of fun and a good way to waste a Saturday. So let's move away from the LAN event, talk a little bit about Llano overclocking again. This was something we did not see at PDX Land, but you might see something like this at QuakeCon if there are some motherboard sponsors, some overclocking-based guys there. The crew over at Akiba have managed to push the AMD Llano A8 3850, it's the highest-end Llano Fusion processor, to its limits to achieve a SuperPi 32 million score of 14 minutes, 17.5 seconds at 4.75 gigahertz. Keep in mind that the default clock speed of this processor is 2.9 gigahertz, so that's a 1.85 gigahertz increase. That's pretty impressive. They did use liquid nitrogen, and they're very, really close breaking the 5 gigahertz barrier. There's also a picture, I think if you click through from our story to the full story, of what shape the processor was in when it was finished, and it wasn't that great a shape, to be sure. They did actually hit 4.906 gigahertz, but they apparently didn't finish the SuperPi 32 million results, so they had to run it at 4.75. Fairly impressive results here. 69% overclock on the processor in total, and pretty impressive results. Obviously, AMD's not going to be able to do this and sell processors for any more expensive or any kind of higher cost, but if you're interested in overclocking, LN2 stuff, check out that little news post there. And those Japanese are always pretty crazy with the amount of overclocking they're willing to do. Have either of you done any of the liquid nitrogen overclocking personally? I know we may have seen it in person, but have you done any of it?
No. As crazy as I am. I'll just stick with the water cool. What I find interesting about this is, if you remember, like, you think back to years ago when you see this kind of extreme cooling stuff, the percent gain you would get on that versus what you would get, like, with your typical, like, what you could do at home.
Yeah.
Right, with just a good heatsink. Back, a few years back, even a year back, you would get a much bigger jump then than you can now. So that actually says a lot for, like, how good CPUs are nowadays.
Process technology improving, yeah.
They're pushing it much closer to what the ultimate capability of that chip is, even in extreme cooling, right? And you're getting pretty close to that, percentage-wise. Just if you're pretty good at tweaking your CPU at home and have a halfway decent cooling solution on it. So that's also something interesting to take out of this. Because I saw that almost 5 gigahertz, and my initial gut reaction was like, that's all, right? Because we have CPUs nowadays, people can overclock them to almost 4, just at home, just with like a good heatsink. Right?
Huh. Yeah. No, you're right. That's true.
Yeah.
Jeremy, you posted an interesting news post here just yesterday, actually, with a very outgoing title, I guess I'll say, something that raised a lot of eyebrows. Intel and AMD be warned ARM could grab up to 20% of the laptop market in the next 4 years. That's a pretty bold claim, even with architecture and all that type of stuff.
Is that... Wait.
That's the same skull, yeah. So that's Dan Aykroyd's liquor?
That's the real one?
I believe you need to turn off your mute there, too, if you want to tell us about this wonderful skull.
Well, if I'm going to run out and grab a bottle out of the fridge, I should probably put it on mute.
Is that the real Dan Aykroyd?
It's not really good vodka, though. And Dan Aykroyd's amusing. He used to vacation in Kingston, Ontario, where originally from.
Yeah.
After I got sick of the 70s.
Is that a real Crystal Head? Like, that's it?
Yeah, it's one of those Mexican ones that foresees the end of the world if you crush it.
Ah, yes.
That's not good.
No, it's glass, but it is a skull. It did have booze in it. Hey. But, yes.
It did.
Speaking of skulls and dire warnings, those of you not paying attention to the fact that Windows 8 is going to run on ARM architecture, you're missing out on something here. We've now got iSupply, who does a lot of predictions about the computer market, saying by 2015 they're expecting a good chunk of the laptops, in fact 1 out of every 5, 20%, are going to be sold with an ARM-based processor in it. And this is not really a huge jump. All of a sudden you've got a major Microsoft operating system which people are tied to, and if XP is any indication, if they like it, they will not let it go ever. Although we've got 996 or so days before XP finally expires.
Right.
So if they go a completely different direction with Windows 9, which is going to have a different name from what we're being hearing, those that like the Windows name are going to stick with 8. And all of a sudden, they've got ARM to deal with. And we've already seen Cortex-A9. And we've got a good hint as to what Mali is going to be able to do, or Mali if you like it that way. So even at current technological levels, ARM is looking kind of attractive. Very, very low power, and so all they have to do is pump up the processing power and, try and keep the power levels fairly low, as opposed to Intel and AMD that are desperately trying to bring the power levels down while keeping their performance levels.
Right.
And you've also had them just at what you saw, Ryan, in Seattle, the AMD conference, where ARM was a big part of that, talking about unused silicon and the fact that, hey, you've got this thing that can do incredible things, but if you're not running, say, a BOINC application, it's not really doing anything except eating power. ARM, on the other hand, is quite happy to sit, sub 1 watt in some cases. And so if they crank up their power a little bit, as they're doing with the new architectures, it really looks like they've got a good shot at being a significant notebook player. AMD and Intel are desperately trying to, say long life, ultra low power computing, And ARM's sort of scratching their heads saying, yeah, we've been doing this forever and sold significantly more processors than you've ever dreamed of, although not many people know it's an ARM processor inside. We didn't have to brand it. So it kind of speaks to the idea that ARM is challenging Intel and AMD on the server side and on the mobility side. And as far as they care, the desktop can go and die a quiet death, which, frankly, in, our lifetimes is probably going to happen. No one's going to want a desktop processor anymore. It's just going to be too big, and processing power and storage density are going to be so small, are going to be so dense that you don't need a desktop anymore. You can carry your computing power with you. And these guys, and to a lesser extent VIA, have been doing that the whole time.
There's a lot of other things pushing this whole shift to the lower power for the CPU, if you think about it. Most recently is a pretty much bigger shift towards solid state versus spinning disks, so there's your much reduced power consumption there, right? Because solid state drive pretty much only sucks power when it's writing, for the most part. Reads take significantly less power, and idle is next to zero, depending on what the controller is. So that takes care of that. You don't have to worry about hard drive spinning up, slowing down, and whatnot. Another big chunk is backlights for the screen, which almost everything nowadays is shifted to LED, which is way more efficient than compact fluorescent that was, used in the past. So as you start chipping away at the power use of all those other things, then all you're left with is the CPU, like the RAM and the chipset, right? So
and the graphics.
And the graphics, whatever the graphics may be. So and ARM might sort of be trying to step into that too, right? With, more recent, higher end cell phone graphic options like what we played with at CES and Tegra and all that other stuff, right? So.
Oh, and that actually adds into another interesting fact. If they don't decide to go with ARM graphics, you know how NVIDIA doesn't quite have the license to build chipsets and interface with current x86, with Sandy Bridge, and the memory controllers?
Right.
No such problem with ARM. No such problem at all.
No, it's true. Yeah.
I don't know how easy it would be to separate out, like the ultra low power graphics that we see in a Tegra processor. You would think they would just kind of buy the whole Tegra platform if they're going to go that route, but I don't know. It's possible, right? And don't forget, NVIDIA has Project Denver. This is something that's still in the works. This is their capability to actually design their own CPU architecture based on the ARM instruction set. So they have options in this world too, and all of that would fall under this claim of 20%, a potential 20% of notebook shipping with ARM-based processors. So that's pretty cool. Also, something interesting that came up this week is Southern Islands, the upcoming AMD GPU, discrete GPU, not a fusion processor or anything like that. This is a new graphics card that we can all get excited about for higher, better performance gaming. Apparently is actually moving up in schedule. Originally, we weren't expecting to see anything until first quarter next month, and very much the same way we talked about earlier with the Sandy Bridge E-Series schedule. This actually might be improving on its time to market, thanks to some, it says, advancements in 28-nanometer TSMC field programmable arrays found inside the high-K metal gate design, modified for lower power states. This doesn't obviously mean that we're going to see Southern Islands in like cell phone chips or anything like that, but it appears that what will happen is, much like the previous generation where we saw the mid-range, lower power GPUs actually released first into market, that we may actually see the same thing here. They might try to get these kind of lower cost, lower power 7000 series cards, we're just going to assume that's what they're actually going to be called, out into the market first based on Southern Islands architecture. If you remember over our talks over the last several weeks, Josh and I went back and forth about what AMD showed at the AMD Fusion Developer Summit, how they talked about Southern Island GPUs, what was going to change between that, that we are moving away from the VLIW architecture into something much more kind of built like NVIDIA's Fermi architecture, but with its own differences and differentiating features. That could come as soon as this quarter, according to the story over from Charlie at Semi-Accurate. And this would be based on the 28-nanometer process, not the currently existing 40-nanometer TSMC process that we are seeing. What's interesting here, and I kind of wish Josh was here to bounce some ideas off of is that we always kind of assumed that when we got to 2822, we'd be talking about Global Foundries maybe building these GPUs, but it looks like, according to this has already been taped out. It's going to be running at TSMC, 28 nanometer, high K metal gate, and of course,
a specific type of high K metal gate.
Okay,
it's a very low power high K metal gate
that they probably can't use for their high end, like enthusiast class parts. Would be my guess.
No, I mean they refer to it as HPL. It's a low power high K metal gate. They don't necessarily mean low power in that this is designed for cell phones and netbooks. They mean it's got what Charlie refers to as a sweet spot, which is going to be a little bit lower than the performance silicon that we're looking at. So, like we saw with the HD 4000 series, like we sort of saw with the Evergreen series, it's almost like AMD is going to be leading with their middle foot. Not necessarily low-power GPU, definitely not high-powered. We're not talking the equivalent of the 6990 coming out. But, an in-between, 40 nanometer would be too hot. 28 nanometer proper HKMG is not quite ready yet, so this will work.
Yeah. You also pointed out in the story that since NVIDIA tends towards more aggressive clocks, if you look at their shader frequencies, they tend to be in the 1300 to 1500 megahertz speed, whereas AMD's currently reside in the, let's say, 700 to 900 megahertz speed, that these experiences and adjustments that TSMC has made on this process technology will not necessarily help NVIDIA's own jump into the high-K metal gate 28 nanometer process, which I'm sure just breaks AMD's heart, right? So,
well, as we all know, that NVIDIA's been whining about the 28 nanometer, and it's all TSMC's fault. Why we're not going to have Kepler out on time, and da-da-da-da-da.
It always is. Let's talk about. We keep beating around the bush with QuakeCon, but let's do that one more time. We're going to talk about an interview you posted about, Jeremy, of John Carmack saying that first-person shooters have not hit the innovation wall, which I think is, unfortunately, a trait that a lot of gamers, PC gamers and console gamers, would kind of agree with or believe.
Well, the gamers kind of, in that we still, you got to go on the space shuttle and do the vomit comet. Still not, So, gamers were still buying games. And in a way, that is the base of his argument, is the fact that, hey, people love to call it, or critics love to bring out Call of Duty as something that's, they're just sick of. Oh, it's a squad-based World War II shooter. Oh, look, it's another squad-based World War II shooter. Oh, Shadow Op. Oh, I wonder if this is going to be, it is kind of the same. Problem is, it's one of the best-selling game series on the planet. And it's kind of hard to argue with that. It's also kind of hard to argue with the inventor of Doom and everything else that Carmack has brought us, both good and bad. On the other hand, as, a gamer that considers himself a little discerning, the most innovative first-person shooter I saw was Duke Nukem Forever, which, if it had come out in the mid-'90s, would have been incredible. As it is now, it was a Halo clone with some offensive parts added in. Crysis 2 held off until, I've got high textures and DX11. Yeah, I enjoyed the first one better. Battlefield 3, have my hopes for. Maybe it is, maybe it won't. Someone just mentioned Red Orchestra 2. That was a indie project which was eventually bought out and turned into a game, but originally you could get it for free, which was interesting. But his argument is, look, they're selling. They're selling brilliantly.
Right.
People aren't really complaining. Is that really an innovation wall? Because what we're doing right now is going to the third-person mode. So a third-person, first-person shooter, an acronym which should probably never be pronounced. The idea is, how many movies have you watched, apart from Blair Witch Project, which were shot entirely in first-person? They're very few. They're very far between, because the directors can't put in a lot of the special effects, the environments, the immersive effects, to steal a PRR phrase, if you're in a first person. because you can't see the environment interacting with the person. You can just see
Right.
from the person environment interacting with the environment. And, frankly, it is a good point. And, I mean, with HDR and motion blur and the movie grain and everything, there is, an argument for people that are really enjoying that. There's also an argument for people enjoying Halo. It's not a
sure
good
there is.
argument, but it is an argument. So, as far as I'm concerned, okay, you've got a market, and so you can't argue with that. You're running a business. You need money to develop these games. You need to ensure the vulture capitalists that there is going to be money coming for them to give you money in the first place. And it makes sense. So you've got the indie people who are bitching and screaming because they have to. They're trying to put their game out there. They're saying pay is what you feel it's worth. But, they're not going to be a huge market. And you're never going to build a giant game off of it, or you're a giant game company off of it. But really, I mean, that's not necessarily an innovation wall. That's a marketing wall. For me, the wall is how easy it is. They want to be all-inclusive. This guy wrote Doom. You could put yourself in a point where you could go no further in Doom. If you screwed up, if you sprayed ammo all over the walls, if you took a lot of damage, if you didn't kill people from behind you, you would die. And if you decided to load that game again, you would die. And until you decided to go back a few saves, which you hope you had, you would essentially walk yourself into a corner
Right.
where you were dead. That doesn't happen anymore. We've gone from the Leisure Suit Larry idea of if you push the wrong button, you are completely and totally dead, to, the Loom, the Microsoft sound-based one, which is a brilliant game, but you couldn't kill yourself. Even if you wanted to, you could actually never put yourself in a position where you died. And first-person shooters nowadays, it's almost impossible. Crisis 2, I'm pretty sure it's supposed to be a tactical-based shooter where you're planning and stuff. Well, no, apparently you just crank up armor and run around and just slash people's throats.
Well,
and that works.
I think here's the issue. I don't think first-person shooter games have hit an innovation wall. I think maybe a lot of developers have hit an innovation wall. I think it matters what perspective you're in, third-person, first-person, overhead view, three-quarter view like in Diablo style. Any of those games can go through periods of staleness, right? And he does have a very good point that, look, if you look at the Call of Duty sales, people keep buying it, right? So are we really doing a disservice, or are we giving people what they actually want? There is room for people to develop new ideas around any of these interaction types, essentially, right? Third person is how you interact with a game versus first person versus overhead versus side scroll. Those are all, genres, interaction formats, those types of things. There's a lot more you can do with first-person shooters. I mean, look at what Portal did with a first-person shooter.
Yeah.
Which is it essentially is, right? I mean, nobody ever thought of traversing an environment in a first-person view the way that Portal did, and it was very creative in doing so. So I think there's a
only
place.
Get one gun.
Right, exactly. We only get one gun, and it doesn't even shoot bullets, right? What is all that?
It had 2 bullets.
And an orange one and a blue one. But, you look at, it's making Rage, which is supposed to be something different than just your average standard first-person shooter. We'll see if it lives up to that claim. We'll see if they're able to get as much of that RPG-ish side and the driving side and that type of thing into the game to really make it a good example of John Carmack's own argument that, look, we're not at a place where there's no innovation. And he even you mentioned in your story that it kind of like talks down, doesn't really talk down, but he laments about these indie developers that complain or get, quote, snooty attitudes about first-person shooters coming out and looking similar or feeling similar. These are still selling in huge numbers. People still want them, whether they're on PC or console. We're not even arguing that point.
Which is why the individual and the small developers are screaming that. Because they need attention. Come over here because all those ones are boring.
Right.
It's a shot at the indie developers, but then again, it's a shot at keeping his market.
Indeed. We're also going to talk, Jeremy, you posted an editorial that I thought was very good, posted it up today, that kind of takes a few points of what Intel has been doing recently, what they have been purchasing, in particular going from we started with McAfee. They went to the purchase of Infineon, and then most recently Fulcrum Microsystems. And you have this kind of general overview of what you think Intel might be doing. Obviously, we're just theorizing things here. But what, in the end, what do you think this combination of hardware and security and networking hardware all kind of adds up to?
Well, it's a fun little soap opera to follow, and in a way it sort of wraps into the original purchase of McAfee, where, a lot of the pundits were sort of suggesting that, Intel wants to put antivirus on a chip. And, they want to make sure that you can trust the Intel platforms more than anyone else's because, hey, there's heuristic antivirus built right into this chip, and it'll protect you from everything. And we can bring back Palladium, DRM, TMP, let's call it Intel Net? No, wait, Intel Active Management. Yeah, that sounds good, because that's better than Palladium and Trusted Platform Management and all the things that have failed horribly before. Not necessarily because they're a bad idea, but because a lot of us don't necessarily trust our platforms. Sure. But it is a selling point that they can sort of do now, because we decided, all right, McAfee was there so that Justin Ratner could justify him saying, Intel's focused on security right now, and that's our number one priority, and, ignore all the press releases you see about speeds and power consumption and everything. No, It's security right now. It's security. But all of a sudden, they pick up Infineon. Not necessarily a fab company, because it doesn't make anything, and not necessarily all of Infineon, but all of Infineon's intellectual property and patents about their wireless communication. So, hey, they've got Wi-Fi. Makes a lot of sense. They make chipsets. Now they've got their own proprietary chipsets with a whole bunch of patents that they didn't own already. Okay, still makes sense. I can still follow with a, solid, this is security first. And then they pick up Fulcrum Microsystems. Now, you may not have heard of Fulcrum Microsystems before. It's because they don't quite make backbone switches, but they make high-end, like 40 gigabits, 100 gigabit switches. The stuff that's sitting in major corporations or that's sitting in data centers that are providing VMs or VLANs or VPNs, providing serious beyond just a local area network connection access. So now Intel is looking at providing major network connections, which has a big market behind it. There are major players there. There are people who have been specially trained by a certain company for thousands of dollars a course with dozens of courses a year just to keep up every year. No mention of that particular name, because they do run our backbones. But, okay, maybe Intel is suddenly looking at a complete trusted platform management ecosystem. You've got a desktop that's running an Intel microchip or CPU, which has built into it antivirus. You've got an endpoint, a server, or in the case where there isn't a client, a virtual server where the desktop is pulling from the server, and it's got the trusted management built in, and it's traveling over network appliances, which are also Intel chips with antivirus and trusted platform management built in. And suddenly, you've got total protocol management, or whatever you want to call TPM, because there's so many acronyms you can just make fun of with it, where every single piece of it is controlled by a single company. And that is, again, one of the core resistances towards an actual...
Don't forget about their purchase of McAfee, unless you just mentioned it and I missed it.
I started out with that. So that is the key of it, is antivirus, McAfee, the idea of DRM, TPM, whatever Intel wants to, whatever the PR department wants to slap on it, you have an entire ecosystem from endpoint to start point and back again that can be trusted because every single chip along the way can actually dump out code directly without even using a cycle that doesn't match what they're expecting. And it's all of a sudden going from, hey, we had a VP of Intel that wanted to sort of say security first, that's what we mean, to, good God, they could probably pull it off. Of course, I could completely be wrong. It's just fun speculation at this point.
The whole idea of them getting some kind of end-to-end solution, right? That's what you're talking about is
well, and owning the path along the way too.
Right. I mean, end-to-end, like the entirety of it. Intel's always said that their goal was not to create blacklists, but to basically create whitelists, right? So this is kind of one way to do that, right? You assume everything not on this pathway, not included in this end-to-end list of products is malicious, and I think that would work. Idea. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it would work like in this utopian world, but this monopolistic world that Intel maybe envisions, but I don't know really how reliable.
Intel monopoly?
Yeah, it's weird. Let's see. We do have one more bit of news to talk about in case you thought we had missed it. Alan's going to talk about some of the new Apple hardware that was released today. I think you'll actually be able to buy it. If you're listening to this podcast and you download it, you'll actually be able to go to the Apple Store and pick it up. It includes, was it iMacs and MacBook Air and that kind of stuff?
No, not iMacs.
MacBook Mini, or Mac Mini.
Okay, well, for one, there's the Lion, which is coming out.
Okay, right. Yeah, Matt or Steve did post a good overview of the OS X Lion type features there. You can check out.
That's out. It's like $29, much cheaper than previous OS updates. It kicks the crap out of the Microsoft OS update. If you think about it that way. Okay, so hardware-wise, they've got the Air got updated. So it's still available in an 11 and a 13-inch, but it's the speed of these things that has changed because now they're based on Core i5, Core i7, low-power models, and they're available with solid-state up to, I think, 256 gig now, which is pretty good considering it's that thin sliver of a solid-state drive that they have to squeeze all that onto, right?
Right.
For that form factor. And it's using the integrated graphics on the i5 and i7 CPUs.
Sure, makes sense.
Which is probably an upstep from what it was before, right? Because it was whatever it was, I don't know. It was something cheesier than that, I think. So that's pretty darn good for speed. The other thing, just looking at that on the Apple website, the thing that was really elegant is that these models have Thunderbolt. And
which would excite you, I imagine.
Fireball.
Well, no, it's okay. So the way that Apple is doing it is like the way that we sort of would expect it to work. One simple plug goes to a Thunderbolt-enabled display that they now sell. There's like a 27-inch, basically like a Thunderbolt display. They sell it for $1,000. It's kind of pricey, but it's a 27-inch screen. It's decent, high-end screen, LED backlit, the works. But it adds a whole array of ports out the back and audio. Like I guess there's an audio solution built into the display with speakers, and there's like FireWire 800 out the back, gigabit Ethernet, like 4 USBs. There was some other thing. I think there was another Thunderbolt, so you can, because it'll do forwarding, sort of like how FireWire works, where you can pass it and daisy chain it through devices. So the fact that all that is on the back of the display, so you're basically, this just blows a typical docking station away, if you think about it, right? It's passing the video, gigabit Ethernet, FireWire 800, a bunch of USB, I think 3.0, all that over one cable to the display, and it just works just seamlessly. Like you just plug it in and go, and then you unplug it and run off with, with the Air.
It's a pretty compelling feature.
And considering how tiny that hardware is, if it's actually able to do that full 10 gigabit spec, that's pretty darn impressive coming out of that hardware. And I imagine the same thing is going to be true of, new MacBook Pros whenever they decide to do those. I don't think they have it yet, right? Mm-hmm. This is like the first iteration of Thunderbolt.
Right.
Okay, so along those lines, there is Mac Mini updates as well. So they finally, this is like, I guess, third generation now, Mac Mini. And the prices look the same, but the CPUs are updated, so it's updating to like i5s. I think it's Core i5 in both models. There's like 2.3 gigahertz, 2.5 gigahertz. The higher end one has a Radeon 6630M, which is probably pretty beefy for something that, that tiny of a device.
Right.
And I'm not sure, do those have Thunderbolt? Yes. So, no optical drive, but Thunderbolt on those too. So that's pretty decent. Considering it's I think the lowest model is $600.
Now, you said you were potentially interested in the new MacBook Air. And I was immediately trying to convince you otherwise that if we wait a little bit, we might get a PC version, the Ultrabook, the Asus UX or U1 or whatever, the UX series, whatever they called it that we saw at Computech.
Well, the Asus one with the stainless steel cover.
Right. I want to see how cheap that is, though. Mm-hmm. Like, in practice, because I have a feeling that thing looks so close and now is going to be on such hardware parity with the new Air model that just came out. Mm-hmm. What's the stop basis from pricing it just like maybe $100 cheaper? I mean, it's going to be direct competition with an Air, right? So they can't undercut it by too much. Can they?
I mean, Apple works on different operating margins than everybody else.
Right, and I'm with you there, but that looked to be a pretty high-quality product that Asus was making, with the way the anodized aluminum and all that. That costs money to make, right? There has to be, they're going to have to make some money back on tooling, because they're doing a lot of the same kind of things that Apple does to make their products, right? Except now Asus is just now starting it, right? So there has to be some kind of return on investment for those guys to pay off that gear that they had to buy to build these things.
Right.
Well, I just picture Jobs walking into a manufacturing plant, now that Apple is using the same hardware that PCs are. I want that one, and that one, and that one. Those you throw out. That one, and that one. The rest you toss out. Because you run into so many people that say, well, Apple's more reliable. And it's like, well, yeah, because the lid's welded shut, so you can't work on it, and you take it to the Genius, and they give you a different one that the scratches match on. But no, I swear, they pick and choose their hardware because Jobs has a reality distortion field, and he could probably take it in to a manufacturer's plant and do exactly that. Which one's been top? Those ones are mine.
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, I mean, they could, and that's not not being crazy as it is maybe being a smart business person, and because of that, if you're demanding better hardware, then you should maybe you're paying more and you're demanding a higher cost because of it. I don't know. It'll be interesting to see. I'm sure we'll see reviews of these out very soon. We've already seen some posts and that kind of stuff about them, but apparently they actually will show up at your local stores tomorrow. Or today, if you're listening to this in recorded format. So keep an eye out. I think the MacBook Airs are incredibly sexy machines. And if they would just be a little bit better priced,
cheaper.
I think it's something I could get behind. Time for our weekly QuakeCon reminder, August 4th through the 7th, Dallas, Texas. We will be having our PC Perspective Hardware Workshop once again, Saturday. I believe it will be at 3:30 p.m. on Saturday, local time. Check back with us and at the PC Perspective site. We'll have updates when everything is 100% official, but right now we're 99% Saturday, 3:30 p.m. We're getting our lists together for prizes. We're getting our lists together for presentations. You, too, can enter the QuakeCon website if you are above the age of 13 years old, apparently. Some cool things that we're probably going to be doing at the show. We'll have the case mod contest again. Steve is, in fact, going to be with us, helping us moderate that type of event. We're going to have, if you have a good case mod, if you know people that do good case mods, make sure they show up. If you're in the BYOC at QuakeCon, you are automatically entered. We will come around and look at all the machines, and there will be information for you at sign up. So we're going to present the best case mods at the workshop. Let the crowd vote on who should win the vast assortment of prizes. We'll have lots and lots and lots of prizes to raffle off as well. I think pretty much every other year we've done this, we have run out of time before we have run out of prizes, so we just start throwing stuff into the crowd. We also think we're going to do some more interesting games this time. We're thinking about doing a system build contest where the winner, whoever gets the system built and booted the fastest, gets to keep the system that they built. Maybe we'll do some other type of skill-based games as well for hardware, in addition to our standard come in, sit down, take a raffle ticket, and we'll go from there. So it's a lot of fun. It's 2 hours of hardware discussion, really cool things going on, lots and lots, thousands and thousands of dollars of free hardware. So if you are in or around the Dallas area that weekend, August 4th through 7th, make sure you stop by the workshop. You don't have to go to the BYOC to come to the workshop. You can still win prizes. You can still go in. All you have to do is park, go inside the hotel, find the event. We won't discriminate against you in that way. So we'll also have some T-shirts and stuff. I think we're making up like 400 T-shirts again this year. So lots of goodies to go around. And you can be part of PC Perspective podcast history as we use memorable quotes and lines from previous podcast episodes as liners for the shirt. So who knows what the hell is going to happen with all that. Yes, so that's that. Hardware software picks of the week really quickly. I'm going to cheat here. It's not really a cheat. If you haven't tried Spotify, chances are you haven't gotten an invite yet. I signed up for a premium account. It's $10 a month. Spotify is one of those many streaming music services now offered in the United States. This one tends to do a very, very good job. I'm kind of torn. There's a lot of positives, and there's still some negatives to it. I'm a big fan of the Zune music player, obviously not supported by Spotify. I'm a big fan of the Zune Marketplace. I have a lot of music on my Zune Marketplace, not kind of cross-compatible. Spotify will let you download music. Obviously, it's DRM to being played on the Spotify player, but they have players for Windows and Mac, Android and iPhone, maybe BlackBerry. That could be a lie. But you have access to all of this music anywhere you can go as long as you want to stream it, and you can actually download these files to your phone so you can do offline music viewing and that kind of stuff. They do have free accounts, but right now they're invite only on that. If you go to their website, spotify.com, you can sign up for one of the free accounts. Free accounts, you can still stream all the music you want. There's just commercials intermixed with it, but less than on the radio, I'm told. With the premium account, there are no commercials, and you get a little bit better access to offline content and that type of stuff. So if you're looking for something new to try, give Spotify a shot. If you've used Napster, if you've used a Zune Marketplace, if you used Mog, those types of things, this is another option to kind of compare and look at. And as I spend more time with it in the coming weeks, I'll be sure to report back here kind of what the highs and lows of it are, and if I really recommend somebody spending the money on it on a monthly basis. So there you go. Jeremy, it looks like you were taking over for Josh for this week's hardware pick.
Well, kind of, although I did beat Josh to it because I was shopping around finishing off the hardware leaderboard and found what is, frankly, compared to what I paid for my DDR3, a disgusting deal. Corsair XMS 4 gig, so two 2 gig pairs, for $37.99. No mail-in rebate, no instant rebate. It's just $38. And
you want to get really mad at me?
Well, I'm already mad at you for the amount of SSDs that you carry around on a regular basis.
So if you go to that on Newegg, Invisible Hand just popped up and said that the same RAM, same part number, is available for $20 at CircuitCity.com.
Nice.
$19.99, $20 rebate in stock.
Oh, rebate. So you
Yes.
have to pay more, and maybe you'll get it back in credit for Circuit City.
Well, it's like before the rebate, it's like $1 more than the one you found.
Yeah.
So,
but that was one of the reasons that I picked this, though, is, I'm sorry, mail-in rebates have become de rigueur. Everyone is used to them. They price things off of it, and they get upset at the fact that, oh, wait, it costs more. Oh, and sorry, Ken is right. It is one 4 gigabyte stick. You buy 2 of them. Or if you're buying a Llano system, buy 4 of them because it works better. It really does.
Nice.
But, sorry, really, I hate mail-in rebates. And so even if you're going to spend a little bit extra money in the end, up front, it's cheaper. Hey,
Yep.
you got to love it.
Agreed. Alan, what do you got for us? Something on
So I
the
guess-
software side, it looks like.
I guess part of my pick will be that invisible hand thing that I just used. If you don't have that installed on your browser, you probably should. It just
What
this
is
little-
what is Invisible Hand, Alan?
This is a little, okay, so it's a plugin that runs mostly in the background. If you go to any typical e-tailer kind of website and look at any particular item, it like intelligently will look at what the part number is, and it just queries a back-end database that the invisible hand guys run, and it just finds if it's cheaper anywhere else, and if it is, then a little bar just pops up like along the top of the browser, and it just says, hey, I found this, I looked at 8 other places, and I found it for this amount cheaper here. And then you just click on it, and it just goes right to the same part on the other website. It's painless, and I've gotten all kinds of deals on stuff just by using that. It's cool because it only looks at the thing that you're already looking at, right? So it's
So it's not
like trying
going
to-
out and kind of picking different things for you or anything like that.
Yeah, it only looks at the part number, especially if it's something that has a part number, even more so if it's in the URL itself. Then it'll pop up on me on like a Google product search for, if you're accurate enough on the part number. It'll pick up on it. It'll say, hey, it's this cheap over here. And it just...
That's pretty cool.
Real easy.
Cool.
But, okay,
Your
but
other pick, though.
the real pick, passwordcard.org. Which,
Password
wow,
card
work is quick.
work.
All right, so here's the thing. You have to use some crazy, insane password requirement thing for whatever you may be using, right? Has to be so many characters and so many different kinds of symbols, everything. Okay. You're trying to remember all these things. It'd be much easier if you just had something you could look at that had a bunch of random jumble on there, but some means of figuring out where to look in the jumble that you would have to remember. Okay, so basically there's a random hash this website generates, and it prints out, and it gives you a printout, like you have the ability to print this thing out, hopefully in color, and there's like 8 rows and like 30 columns or something worth of just random password gibberish generated off of that hash.
Okay.
And all you have to remember is how many digits you're using for your password and like what part of the card you were looking at, like which direction you were going as you were reading it. And there you go. There's your password, right? The cool thing is it's a really crazy random password that you would have written down, and you would have it in your wallet on the card, even if you can laminate it or whatever. But you lose it, nobody knows what your password was. You can look at that. Right? There's just a random jumble of stuff on there, right? You obviously wouldn't want to be tracing your finger across the one that you typically use on this thing and leave some kind of impression that this is the thing that I usually use and someone could figure it out. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty good. And the website actually shows you the hash that it used, that it randomly generated that particular card with when you loaded the page. So as long as you remember that number, even if you lose your card, you can just go back to the website. Put that
So is
number
this
back
something
in.
where I have to create my password out of the data on this card?
Yeah, you would just use it almost like a random password generator, except you're just randomly picking what part of the card. There's no website. Once you printed the card, that's it. It's a piece of paper.
Right.
You don't have to worry about some gadget to figure it out. None of that, and you can actually have it written down. It's like the equivalent of a safe version of having your password
Tape
written
it
on a
to your
sticky
monitor.
note. Yeah, you could literally tape this card to the side of your monitor, right? And someone would if someone tried to ding you for, hey, you got your password on the side of your monitor. Oh, really? Here, go ahead, try to log in. You figure it out.
Mine's going to start at column 1 and go across 4 letters. Don't tell anybody, though, because
1,
that's
2,
all I want to
3,
remember.
4.
You have to cut mine into a 1-inch strip, so that it's a very long spiral, and then wrap it around a 3-inch cane, and then write down the stuff that's facing 360 degrees, as long as you have the K facing
Good
at
idea.
0.
I like that one.
Oh, jeez.
All right.
Yeah, but this was the most elegant thing I could find that was something you could just have on your wallet, but not be compromised if
Not
you
too
lost
bad.
your wallet.
Not too
Yeah,
bad.
no, that's nice.
Yeah.
All right, that is going to wrap up the show for for us this week. If you want to get a hold of us, we didn't do any emails. We had a lot of new stuff to get to without Josh to read it in his elegant form. I thought it would be sad to do it without him. Podcast at pcper.com is the email address, 1-888-38-PC-PER, toll-free telephone number in the U.S. and Canada. If you want to share this podcast with your friends, pcper.com/podcast. We highly recommend that you do so. It'd make all of us much happier people. If you are on computing forums, if you're on computing chat rooms, nerds that want to know about hardware, send them our way. Let us learn them about some PC technology. So that's it. We will be back next week, hopefully with 4 or more people, hopefully all with functioning video and audio systems through the newly revamped Twit Studios. So we will see you next week. I'm Ryan Schraub.
Isn't it?
Brick Twit House, actually.
Twit
Brick House. Twit Brick House.
I twit a brick.
Yeah.
Jeremy Hellstrom?
And Al Malventano, and don't say Twit Brick House 3 times fast or you might mess something up.
Thanks for listening.